Earth is a weird place. There are countless things that have been witnessed by people from all corners of the earth that seem to be impossible to explain. Sure, you can give a broad answer that will make you feel justified that you know everything about anything, but when it comes down to it, unless it can be scientifically proven, then it is still up for debate. You would actually be surprised at what still has no explanation. We still don't fully know why cats purr, why there is a mushroom that only grows in 2 places in the entire world, those 2 places being Texas and Japan, or why there is a giant crater in Siberia that hasn't been able to be explained since being discovered in 1949. So the actual topic of unexplainable things are abundant. New mysteries are discovered every day after all, and things that seem to be only possible in movies or comic books are seemingly making their way into the real world. Take, for example, the bizarre phenomena of raining frogs. And it wasn't just an isolated incident. There have been several occasions where frogs, fish, worms, and everyone's favorite, spiders, have rained down from the skies to the shock, horror, and confusion of anyone in the nearby area. But how did this occur? Was it from a vengeful god to punish mortals? Was it from aliens, seeing if they could cause a reaction from humans? Or was it something else entirely? Let's see if we can find out why in today's video. So sit back and enjoy the very bizarre story of the day it rained frogs. Let's go back to August 4th, 1921. Residents in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, were going about their normal daily activities. People were driving to work, going to the grocery store, and children were playing by the local park. A dark cloud was forming, but nobody thought much of it. A simple rain shower wouldn't be anything to panic over. As time passed and the clouds started to be accompanied by the sounds of thunder, those who were outside, exposed to the elements, began making their way indoors. And when the light sprinkles of rain began peppering the streets, loud smacking sounds were also quickly following. These smacks grew louder and in quicker succession. Some started screaming, and others were in disbelief at what they were actually seeing. Hundreds of frogs were now littering the streets, sidewalks, and yards of Calgary. And to the locals, this seemed like either a very well-established prank or something out of a science fiction movie. But of course, this wasn't the case, as even more frogs began falling from the skies. People were actually witnessing raining frogs. As the frenzy of amphibians stopped falling from above, people began coming outside to take in the full picture. And while it may sound somewhat funny to hear about this, the aftermath wasn't as humorous. Hundreds of dead frogs were now everywhere, covering the streets, cars, and rooftops. There were even some reports that windows had actually been cracked from the forceful impacts. The question on everyone's minds was, what the hell just happened? It may not have been obvious from the start, but shortly after the event, theories about the cause of this random act of Mother Nature would be all over town. Some said they believed frogs had been burying themselves underground and the rainwater had washed them above, which caused the condensed amount of frogs. This could have been easy enough to accept until you take into consideration that witnesses claimed to see frogs falling from the sky, not to mention the damage to certain windows from the impact of their bodies hitting them. Others proposed that aliens were to blame, that they had been testing on frogs from the area, and perhaps they were simply dropped off in the cover of a rainstorm. Another theory was that it was in fact just one singular frog, and all of the others were clones to increase the species count. Not surprisingly, this was not a popular theory, as it seemed extremely outlandish, and for the time being, all people could do was wonder what actually happened. A theory that many deemed to be the concrete explanation of the phenomena was that a tornado had sucked up the frogs out of a pond or lake and carried them miles away to eventually have them shoot out all over the city, giving the illusion that it was in fact raining frogs. And yes, this does seem like a solid answer. Yet, it also has holes in the theory. If it were a tornado, or wind strong enough to do this, then why were there not more residents reacting to this? A simple rainstorm is one thing, but a tornado, that's completely different, and people would naturally want to find shelter. Yet life was going on as normal when this occurred. To add more, no bodies of water in Calgary had been reported of having damage to their surrounding area. Now true, maybe it wasn't a tornado, but perhaps just very strong winds were the culprit. Again, this has its own set of issues. It wouldn't be that hard to imagine a frog being moved by wind. They only weigh about 22 grams or 0.8 ounces, but I have a tough time imagining that this was the first time in recorded history in Canada that strong winds were ever reported. So, why had there never been another report of frogs raining from the sky? Well, actually, there have been, and not just in Canada, all over the world in fact, with some recountings dating back to the 15th century, of raining not just frogs, but fish, spiders, and so much more. Now this is where things get really interesting. As I said, this wasn't the first reported time this ever happened in Canada. Throughout history, in fact, there have been multiple times living things were rained down from the sky. In 1857, lizards dropped from the clouds in Montreal. In 1895, black ants took the role of dive bombers in Winnipeg. In 1903, fish fell on the residents of Moose Jaw. Beetles in British Columbia in 1934, worms in New Brunswick in 1846, and ducks in Alberta in 1932. And this was all solely in Canada. There have been frequent stories of reports of the same or similar things occurring all over the world. In 2013 in Brazil, thousands of small spiders fell from the clouds and quickly covered the streets. With so many in one area, sidewalks were quickly coated with a thick web from the countless arachnids. In 1997, millions of tadpoles rained all over Japan, and to this day, no credible explanation could be given. The only one that seems to hold any sort of weight was due to tadpoles being picked up by waterspouts, or possibly birds, but nothing could be accepted as a concrete answer. Also in 1997, a large frozen squid actually landed on a fisherman in the Falkland Islands, and it actually put him into a coma for 2 days. And again, no answers could be given for this. In 1894, in Bath, England, a cascade of jellyfish actually struck the city and caused injury to the residents there. And these are just a handful of times where some type of living creature has fallen from the sky. The ultimate question here is, how? Every answer that could be given as the definitive answer has holes in it. The geographical difference with many of these occurrences must also be taken into consideration, as for certain places, tornadoes and rainy weather are a very common thing, where in others, they are extremely rare. The timelines also have to be accounted for, as some of the stories take place before the invention of the airplane. Others take place during modern weather radar, yet still can provide no answer. What is causing things as small as a spider or as large as a squid to seemingly become one with the weather forecast? Could it actually be aliens performing tests on various wildlife that call our planet home? Are aliens simply dropping them from hundreds of feet in the air and letting gravity do the rest? Are tornadoes or strong winds to blame for this most unusual phenomena? We would love to hear what you think of this in the comments below. Maybe you know the answer that wasn't mentioned here. If so, let us know. We hope you enjoyed this video,